Sing us the song of your people.
Do you wanna go for a ride? Yes, we wanna go for a ride. Do you wanna go for a ride? Yes, we want to go for a ride. Do you wanna go for a ride? We wanna go for a ride. Do you wanna go for a ride? We wanna go for a ride.
Howdy, welcome to Sneppurrsode 17 of the WereAreWe podcast, where we are going to answer what the fox says, once and for all. Today I am joined by BearX, BlackPaws, Blue Tiger, and Tiger Acolyte. So we've got a lot of felines this time, guys. Say hi.
What's up?
Hello.
Feline, I feel like I need to ignore that request.
Well, this is Orange Wolf, your host. I don't remember if I've already said that or not, but whatever. So, I'm officially a wolf now, and Blue is officially a tiger, and I don't remember how that happened, but he's taking the role on pretty well. He's been a champ, so kudos to that. Yeah, outstanding. Now, go outside.
Were you talking?
Oh, that's wonderful. Did I technically just do a woo? I don't want people from TG to find me or something like that. That's like husky sounds. So today we are going to discuss why the fox says he's not a fox, but he's a fox, but he's not a fox.
You make that sound so complicated.
I've been talking to you for a while.
See, you make it sound like you know who we're talking about, maybe.
All I said was you made it sound so complicated. That's all I said.
It's the whole, Wheel of Foxes thing, where, I sent a PDF to BlackPaws and the whole group a couple days ago from, I'll sort of pseudo-plug, the Three Worlds podcast, and they did an episode on Medicine Wheel, and one of the episodes was on the Wheel of Foxes. And there's a PDF to go along with it, and in the bottom corner, it literally says, at the end of the cycle, the fox just starts chasing its tail again. So does that kind of feel like your personal journey to you, BlackPaws?
Going around and around again? I'd say so. Either that or just staying in one place, at least for a lot of the time.
Oh, it's a really tight circle.
Yeah, I suppose.
So is it more like a you spin me right round baby kind of circle, or more like a round and round rat style circle?
Ooh.
Oh, that those references just went over everybody's head.
Didn't go over mine.
I'm old enough to know what you're talking about. It certainly feels sometimes like the spinning around in one place kind, but I guess it can vary.
So for those of you who have not listened in before, BlackPaws has kind of given some of his personal experience. So just to kind of give a recap, BlackPaws, you've been around since early AHWW, and you kind of stuck around the were critters for a long time, but you're not 100% sure whether or not your own personal experiences fall in the box that is defined as Therianthropy. Does that kind of get it right?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate.
And then from your own personal perspective, has that kind of ever caused you any sort of distress, or have you found some kind of peace and comfort with it? How has that been for you?
A bit of column A, column B, I guess. I mean, nothing else being here for so long has sort of led itself to a certain amount of comfort and inertia, regardless of what the quote-unquote truth is.
Okay, so I'm taking notes here. You said at first that you were standing still, but now you said inertia. So I think you're just chasing your tail faster.
Maybe.
So yeah, this time we're going to kind of dive into that experience a little bit. Does the term fit? Should he sit? How does this kind of thing impact the outlook or perception of someone who's experiencing it? And how does it impact someone who's newer to the community and is going through this kind of self-discovery process? We have a few other talking points that we'd like to go to beyond that too, but we're going to dive into that and kind of discuss what it's like to maybe not be 100% certain if you're a Therian or not.
Okay.
Why don't we start maybe chronologically? Did we want to sort of do a quick recap of BlackPaws travails, just so everyone's on the same page to give them context.
I think that makes sense. Like in the TG forums, I put a link to your journal, BlackPaws, so that people can kind of go back and read over your story. But kind of give us a high level overview about your own personal journey and how you've gotten to where you are now.
Okay, well, it all started way back in, I think was mentioned before, the AHWW days. I joined it as a news group, thinking I would be, discussing, werewolves in pop culture and literature and things like that. Because I frankly had no idea that there were people out there who thought those such things really, really existed. Instead, what I found when I got there was almost exclusively about Therianthropy. I don't think we had that word back then, did we? But
no,
exactly.
We were going by where.
Yeah, you all were aware.
Yes. But anyway, for reasons that I can no longer recall, I decided to hang around, partly because I think I thought it was kind of cool in a sense. But I went to great pains to make sure, that I wasn't not exactly thought of as part of the group, but not Therian or where or what have you, because I honestly didn't think I was. And the more I hung out, the more I got to know folks, through the various internet and real life things. The more people started suggesting I might want to look into the whole thing for myself, which I sort of resisted for a while, but eventually I did at least start poking around in it for various reasons. And sometimes I look back and I'm not sure how much I've progressed in the past, decades. But on the other hand, I can actually sort of say that I'm in a maybe better is not the right word, more accepting place than I was before. I mean, at least I'm willing to entertain possibilities that I probably wouldn't have.
So from the very beginning, there's kind of this, I don't really maybe fit into this group, but I don't really want to not fit into it sort of thing. But you mentioned that at some point you got a piece of artwork from someone that kind of made your gears turn a little bit. So tell us about that.
Well, yeah. It was done by the same person who drew the image I normally use as my user icon. She sent it to me. She basically said, if you are, physically a werefox, this is what I think you might look like. It was the first time anybody had ever done something like that for me, so I think that was part of the reason for my intrigue. But I got it. It was really nice. She based the pose off of a Werewolf the Apocalypse image, I later found out. So I guess it was sort of a pose inspiration. But anyway, I got this feeling like, I don't know, how I usually describe is this like shudder in my chest. And the way I interpreted it at the time was that, maybe there's some part of me that's reacting to that. And I guess maybe because it was the first time I'd ever had sort of an experience of my own that I could even partially connect to Therianthropy, but it got the ball rolling as far as, maybe at least entertaining the idea that it might be true for me.
So prior to getting that piece of art, did you identify in any way, shape, or form as a fox, or did your Therian identity journey, like, had you not really concluded any kind of animal or anything like that?
Not that I remember, or at least acknowledge.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons I sort of went into it skeptical for myself, because I couldn't think of anything that I could hang my hat on as, sort of quote unquote an experience, I guess.
Okay. And as things went along, like, I'm kind of curious about this too. Did anybody ever suggest to you that you may be a different stereotype or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, even so before I settled on Fox, there'd been other suggestions before, or more. I'm not sure what, but you are something, kind of thing. I mean, I just settled on this because, number one, I thought, I agreed that it sort of fit my personality and my background and stuff, and second, I'm having so much trouble considering just the one animal that I don't think I could handle, trying to consider more than one at once.
So it's interesting that you said that they say, I'm not sure what you are, but you're something. So it's almost like they got some kind of Therian in general vibe from you. right?
Yeah, I'd say that was accurate.
Okay. It's interesting because I know there's some discussions going on like in contemporary Therian community where it's like, how much does the species really matter in the grand scheme of things? Like, is there just this like base Therianthropy that is sort of like a mold or a model for behavior, or does it go further into stereotypes? Does it really even matter? So it's interesting to know that even like back then, people were like, hey, you know, there might be just like, you're an animal person. Like, I don't know exactly what you are, but you're an animal person. Did you ever feel like you were pressured into concluding that you were a fox from your peers or from the community at large? Sorry.
Yeah, not particularly in that sense. Maybe you felt a little bit of pressure, you know, just for Therianthropy in general, but not that species in particular.
You and I talked a lot during those times back then.
Yep.
And I mean, I certainly remember your internal struggle that you talked about often. I still don't have any more insight than I did back then, because I certainly you've always had a vibe to me. So
I've been told.
Yeah. People don't stick around the Therian community unless they've got something going on.
And that's an interesting point that I'd like to bring up too. So I know one of the things that you've kind of considered too is like, what if you're not a Therian? But why do you think you would have stuck around groups of animal people for so long if you didn't identify with that to some degree?
Well, I've been asked that quite a bit over the years. My sort of go-to answer is maybe I was, you know, that desperate to fit in somewhere, or you know, just sort of a desire to be quote unquote special in some way.
And now you're going to be a popular because of this episode. So look how far you've come.
Yeah.
That actually is a frequent criticism that gets leveled towards Therians that I see in on Twitter and other social media, that it's something that people do in order to be special or to feel special. But I've never, ever, not once, have I thought, "Ooh, I'm special," or that it's to get it. Like, the last thing I want is any kind of attention. So I don't. How did you react when someone said you might be doing this to feel special?
Well, it's not something I was necessarily told.
Oh, okay. I thought that was something that you had been told.
No, it's sort of one of the first things I thought of when somebody asks the question, you know, why would you still be hanging around?
So it's interesting because other people aren't telling you that you're doing it to feel special, but you're wondering if that's not the case for yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Basically.
Because I've actually, like, even in the community, I've seen some people kind of throw that out at others and be like, you know, it's your experiences seem to kind of not line up. Are you doing this just to feel different or get special treatment or something like that too? So it's interesting that it's more of a self-criticism from your perspective.
The vast majority of it has been, really.
So do you feel like Therians have been a little bit too accommodating for you? Like, are they too accepting in general?
I've occasionally wondered that. It's about, you know, like the initial group that includes the bear here.
Guilty.
It has crossed my mind, you know. It's like, you know, they barely know me. They've only talked to me online, you know. Why do they trust anything I say?
For hundreds of hours online.
Okay, fine, I suppose. It's something, but...
Well, see, now I'm confused, because apparently, BearX, you said that people had the perception that you were too grilly or something like that back in the day, right? So...
Yeah, there is this idea that you run across, especially with sort of the most recent generation of Therians, where they say, "Oh, back then they were all grilling and asking all kinds of questions, and it was super gatekeepy." And I don't think it was like that, at least in the earliest of the early days, and not for the first 10 years or so of the community, as far as I'm aware.
No, I think it was when the trolls really kind of stepped into the community and became just problematic. That's when you saw a lot more of the gatekeeping and then the slow segmentation and fragmentation of the community at large. I would agree, based on what I've seen in history posts and my personal experience, with some of the tail end of that.
While we have a second here, I'm going to say hello to the wolf dog on a mossy log. Hey, Blaze, how's it going?
Yeah, I snuck in the corner. Sorry I'm late, guys.
No problem. At least not for me.
Good to have you on here.
It's been a hectic month for me. I've pretty much had my nose stuck in the books, figuratively speaking.
Not really?
Oh, almost literally. I mean, I'm back in college now. It's my first semester doing my 4-year diploma in digital design and development. And it's my first semester, and so far all the 2 courses that I'm doing have been delivered digitally, which of course I've never done before. So it's been an enormous learning curve for me, not just, the new material, but the delivery methods and being back in an education environment at the age of 40 after being away from it for 20 years. But I'm doing well. I'm getting some marks back now, and they're coming up on top of the alphabet.
Congrats!
As long as you get higher scores than Blue does, that's all that matters.
I don't want to get into that contest.
All right. Kind of try to nudge us back on track.
Bring it to BlackPaws. What do you define Therianthropy as, and are you able to define it?
To back that up a little bit too, I feel a little ridiculous because this is a suggestion from someone on another server. And I feel like we've had a lot of conversations about your doubts with Therianthropy, but we've never actually asked you what you think Therianthropy means to the individual. So I think this is actually something important, and maybe even if someone out there is listening and isn't sure, like if they're having some kind of concerns with their identity and their discovery process, like it may be something important to ask them, just stop in place. What does this actually, like, what does being a Therian mean to you?
Yeah. And some earlier discussion on this actually sort of triggered other lines of thinking because someone suggested or used the words, was I trying to fit in a box established, by the community as I found it? And that actually got me nodding and, pondering there because, as I said, I was completely new to the entire concept. So all I had to define it for better or for worse was the collective experiences of what was then a relatively small community. I'm not sure I can sort of separate those things because it was fundamentally the foundation on which I built everything else.
So that kind of brings me to one of my first questions that I was going to ask you about your experience, BlackPaws, is that do you feel like having been in contact with the community throughout this whole time, do you feel that may have actually hindered you from forming your own opinion authentically of what Therianthropy is?
It's something I've considered, but on the other hand, I don't know that I would have thought that deeply into it in the first place without it.
Good point, yeah.
Because especially when I first started out, I tried looking into it for quote-unquote independent sources, but a bunch of what I found was New Age stuff, which, deals with many of the same things, but really isn't the same thing, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us are kind of guilty of turning to some of the New Age things, not necessarily current contemporary New Age things, but like in my case, New Age things of like the 90s to try to figure out what was going on with me with Therianthropy. So,
yep.
In my personal case, in college, looking into the occult and New Age on a newly budding internet was a very interesting thing. And
yeah, I remember that era.
Ted Andrews made mad loot on his Animal Speak book.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a copy of it here.
Who doesn't? I think
here.
too.
It's a useful reference in some cases. Just don't do much more than reference.
So in your personal case, BlackPaws, then like even answering today, your personal definition of Therianthropy, is that kind of formed on your first impression of what Therianthropy was back in AHWW?
I think so, because I've mentioned this in a previous discussion, but I was surprised at how disassociative Therianthropy is viewed these days, because when I started in the community, I think that was the main, if not sole, not style, but
defining characteristic of it.
Yeah, the way in which the folks there expressed their Therianthropy, to in any extent to the outside world.
in a way that this topic choice itself kind of spun off of that comment that you made on our disassociative episode last time.
Yeah, I'd say so. It was definitely one of the things that made me realize, not only, how many more people there are, considering this kind of thing than there were back then, but also the fact that the whole experience is so much larger, or has a possibility to be so much larger than I ever conceived of it. What I thought was, a defining characteristic, so much so that I thought, oh, if I don't have that kind of experience, I can't possibly fit into that box.
Right. And that's where the labeling and the buzzwords become a problem for people, is because you're cutting off that spectrum.
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, I've definitely been introduced to new concepts since then that, that at the very least broadens my possible personal mental definition in such a way that it doesn't automatically exclude what I remember of my own life. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Barracks who has used the lens analogy before, where it's like seeing the world through like a bear lens or a tiger lens or something like that too. And it is very easy to look back at your past experiences and project that lens onto it. Really, honestly, looking back, we may never know for certain whether or not we may not know the specific influences for how we behaved when we were like 5 or 6 or 7. It's very complex psychology there, right? And our environments dictate things too. So it can be very easy to project like false positives on that. If you get into the mindset of, yes, I'm a Tiger Therian, and then I look back at my life and I'm like, I used to always like to do this or this or this, you can kind of use that to support your current stance on whether you're a Therian or not.
I kind of agree with that and have had that experience myself, in that once I started to understand what Therianthropy meant to me and what it was all about for me, that's when certain things about my past that always seemed strange suddenly made perfect sense. It just kind of brought all these abstract, weird irregularities into alignment with each other, and suddenly there is this complete picture of me. This is who I am. And I was like, oh, okay, now the challenge is, how do I explain this to people? How do I describe it? And that is inherently where all the difficulty seems to arise. It's not about the difficulty of having the experience or the believing in it. It's how do you express it and communicate about it. It's very difficult.
Well, that's one interesting thing too. I think I brought it before. My mate is not a Therian, and sometimes when I try to express some of this Therian stuff to him, he's like, Zeph, this does not matter to me, like, at all. It does not have any kind of importance. And granted, it depends on what the scenario is, but I think sometimes, since the experiences are so personal to us, we expect them to be so personal and profound to other people too, and they may not really be. Like, other people are just kind of going through life, doing their own thing, facing their own experiences, trying to figure themselves out. Maybe sometimes we kind of overthink Therianthropy in that sense, and I don't know, expect it to be some kind of earth-shattering thing for the people who discover it about us, when really it's just another nuance of our personalities.
I think that's a good point. Are you Therian with a capital T, or are you Therian as in just lowercase t? Zeph, you and I have talked a lot about that. Is it your life? Is it everything about you? Is it everything has to circle around you? That's what I mean by with a capital T. Or someone like I know myself, yes, I'm a Therian. That's not my defining point. It's an aspect of me. It's a facet of me. It's all it is. So that's important. I think going back to the piece that Blaze was mentioning there too, I agree it's important to be able to look back in retrospect and say, does things make a different sense? But it's also important psychologically to realize that it could be anything that would be a potential framing for that too. We have found this, and I'm not denying it. I'm not trying to, at least. But it's important. Don't rewrite your history. Your history is your history. Yes, this brings a different lens into it. Yes, it brings a different flavor to memory and history and everything like that. But what we have done tells us who we were, not who we are, and who we will be. That's up to us in the here and the now and the future to define those things. And I think those are more important things for us to focus on. Personally, that's how I kind of see it. So I can be very contemplative. I think pretty much everyone here realizes I've got some deep thoughts at times.
He's neurotic.
Shh. Yes, and your point.
Yeah, I'm one to talk, right?
But, I think also at the same time, I struggle with that, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to do. Live more in the moment than in the past. But the past tells me what went right and what went wrong, and how can I, by acting now correctly, redressing those mistakes of the past and doing better with that.
So, BlackPaws, I'm kind of curious, because another thing that I see, some of the things I'm going to bring up are more for, like, their observations that I have for younger Therians, and I'm wondering if you've experienced the same thing. So we talked about, like, okay, you say I'm a fox, you look back at your past experiences, and you try to be like, okay, well, this probably meant that I'm a fox. This probably didn't have anything to do with it. Do you ever feel like, I feel like some younger Therians, and I'm sure I'm even guilty of it myself, have looked back and they've really been grasping for straws too, to be like, they try to make every little aspect of their life about Therianthropy too, when it could just be a situational thing or just how they were.
But it's everything about me. It's everything about me.
I actually didn't feel like I had any sort of straws to grasp at in the past. One of the big bases for not thinking that I was or could be Therian was because I didn't feel like I had anything in my past to hang on to, even a little. And I was surrounded by people who said stuff like, oh, I always knew because of the way I felt about X, Y, and Z, which is not to say, obviously that those past experiences were grasping at straws themselves. I would say that my entire early experience was really, I guess, defined by my skepticism and my coming in fairly sure that I wasn't Therian. I don't know what effects that might have had on, experiences later. It surely can't have helped with me over figuring out things now. But I mean, I think I've mentioned this before in my sort of my life story thing. I was interested, but not exactly feeling like it was from sort of an outsider perspective, especially since it was something that I hadn't had a conception of before. I had no idea this existed. I didn't even know about, related phenomena like, Native American shamanism or what have you. Just the thought of people, actually thinking they were an animal on any level just never occurred to me. It was just sort of out of my range of experience. And I suppose, that may be one big reason why I was so slow with it, or slow to at least consider trying, to pursue it to see where it went.
Well, I remember saying to you on more than one occasion that, one thing that you could do is just relax with the idea. And I think the very notion of relaxing with the idea is difficult for you because your skepticism gets in the way of simply allowing the idea to wash over you without judgment. Is that accurate?
I'd say that's true. Old habits are hard to break, obviously, especially when it comes to how one thinks. And this was very definitely a huge break from anything I'd thought before, which, in addition to the fact that I was fairly depressed and my self-esteem wasn't that good to begin with at the start. So the idea of there being another layer to me, than the pathetic loser wasn't something I would easily consider, especially in those early days. And I think in general, I am a skeptic. I think I tend to have materialist beliefs in that, I have a hard time believing in something I can't experience or haven't, sensed or experienced myself, which is, again, one big reason for my skepticism to begin with, because it wasn't something I could connect. I felt like I could connect with something I had already experienced. I guess I felt like I was starting from a lesser level, or maybe for even further back than most of the folks I talked to on the news group and IRC were. I've never been a very spiritual person, so that also added to that.
I think that's fair. And BP, I would say that I resonate with that situation. Maybe not as extreme as you are in your skepticism, but I certainly have a healthy skepticism of myself. I've studied enough things to go down that road. But I would agree with Bear's analysis of you. A little too much on the skeptical side, in my opinion, but that's my opinion. We've talked about that.
That's something that's kind of interesting too, and so there's 2 points that I kind of want to segue off for this one. You're
writing a segue? Really? That's so 2000s.
Yeah. So a lot of us go through. So Therianthropy itself is just a weird thing, right? It's not exactly typical. So we go through these processes of trying to logically figure out the bits and pieces when some of them might not even actually have a logical basis anyway. And then there's the emotional aspect of it too, where it's kind of where's the balance between how you feel and how you think. In my case, I was someone who also I actively tried everything in my power to tell myself that I'm not a tiger and just you're thinking dumb, etc., etc., etc. But beyond the emotionality, there were still the experiences that I had that were happening, whether they were rational or not. I don't know. I kind of think that people maybe do overthink Therianthropy a little bit in that regard sometimes.
Yeah, overthinking is a big part of my psyche. I mean, things in general that are even halfway important to me, I tend to overthink. Actually, even minor things. I tend to, overanalyze and go back and forth this way and that. So I guess I'd say it's especially bad for things I actually care about. I guess I don't trust myself on some levels. I second guess myself all the time, going back and forth. As I said, the possibility of being Therian or being a fox or what have you is definitely something where, like the bear said, have the two contradictory ideas at the same time, trying to reconcile my natural skepticism, materialism, and my lack of previous experience with the possibility that I could be Therian. Am I dismissing it for legitimate reasons, or am I just dismissing it out of hand because of my self-esteem or what have you? I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but it's pretty key to my whole dilemma.
This is where I'm going to bring up something that's kind of interesting too, is that, so as far as finding a group that accepts your experiences or something along those lines too, mainstreamers look at Therianthropy and they're like, yeah, y'all are nuts. And that's okay, because from a psychological perspective or anything like that, we're some of those things may seem a little far-fetched to someone who doesn't invest a lot of time in trying to figure out why we think the way we think or anything like that. But I kind of challenged BlackPaws, and I'm like, well, why would you want to hang out with a group that's kind of ostracized for feeling the way that they do? In a sense, yeah, you can find that group to fit in with, but it's a group that's kind of outcast by society too. And why would someone decide to find comfort and, yeah, this is my home, when they kind of know that the mainstream would be like, hey, that's not normal?
I have a standard skeptical answer to that, being that, I was fascinated by the whole idea, and that I was so desperate to be quote unquote special, I guess, that maybe some part of me hung on to that possibility, even though I didn't really believe in it. I have wondered before how having been introduced to this whole concept, before I ever applied it to myself, has affected my whole journey and all that. Yeah, I mean, I know I have to balance out, the opinion of others and with, my own thoughts and journey and experience and all that. But at the same time, I also realize that, even if others' opinions are just that, I do place some value on it. I do place value on the people who give that to me. So maybe that's another reason I hang out with Therians, for that rush of self-acceptance or quote-unquote self-delusion, if I weren't. I have a lot of quote-unquote excuses for questions like that. Why hang out with Therians if you aren't one and all that? And like I said before, it's sort of difficult for me to sort out what is genuine and what's being colored by my existing doubts and prejudices and all that, which does make it tough because I realize I do need some skepticism and doubt to some extent, or else, I won't get anywhere, honestly. But again, when you've already struggled with, the self-image and the doubts about, basic truths of reality and parts of yourself and everything, it's kind of hard to let go of that, especially when it's something that can be as important to you as this spiritual aspect and all that.
Another thing too is like, how much does that skepticism affect your well-being? Does it cause you distress? Because I've seen some people who they put themselves in just a state of almost constant distress over this perpetual, like, trying to make logic out of something that's illogical. It
doesn't now as much as it used to. Even then, at the beginning, I guess it wasn't so much a skepticism as almost a certainty that I wasn't there and I didn't belong there and I was being an intruder and I stuck out like a sore thumb and that I wasn't contributing anything to the community and my presence wasn't worthwhile. A lot of times I felt tempted to leave because I didn't feel like I belonged in the community and that nobody would miss me and that anything I contributed wouldn't be missed either.
We would have chased you down.
Bears are pretty damn quick when they want to be too.
Even then, as I said, I didn't feel bad because I was afraid I wasn't a Therian. It was more like I felt bad because I quote unquote knew I wasn't a Therian. And maybe having those doubts in the past have sort of prepared me for the possibility now, because I guess I've been around long enough to feel like even if I legitimately decided I wasn't Therian, I've grown enough roots in at least certain parts of the community that I would at least still appear, or that, maybe I could still contribute even if I weren't, or at least feel useful as somebody who's been around for a while. At least I hope so. Like I said, I haven't gotten to the point yet where I'm sure I've come to any conclusions of my quote-unquote own free will. So even after all these years, I feel like I'm still pretty far from that.
I'll ask a follow-up question to that. Is it you feel like you found somewhat of a home in this community?
Yeah, I think in a sense I did sort of find a home. If only because, I got along so well with the people, or at least some of the people in the community, and they welcomed me in return and pretty consistently tried to make me feel like I was part of the place, if not one of them. And like I said, it's been so long since then, and I've stayed in touch with just enough people, in real life, even from the community, that I don't feel like I've been completely out of it for years now. And it's something that if I did, take myself out of for whatever reason, I think I would miss the people in it. So yeah, I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way before, but it is at least a home in a sense. Maybe it's the kind of community that I feel most like I could describe that way, because it deals with something, so personal to people. Yeah, and I do enjoy it. At least enough aspects of it and enough of the people in it that I could really genuinely say that. And, all credit to the folks who've kept me around all these years, both then and now, because I've made some good friends from it and had some great experiences. And yeah, like I said, I don't think I'd ever thought of it that way, but I gotta say the answer is yes there.
Well, BP, I got a question for you. You put yourself back in the AHWW days, just to frame it, get us out of the contemporary stuff, and you find an individual similar to how you find yourself, curious but skeptical, not really sure what's going on, but there's an itch that they can't quite scratch. What would you ask them? How would you help them through trying to scratch that itch and understand themselves?
Every time somebody reminds me of how long I've at least known about or interacted with the Therian community, it sort of throws me a bit, because I still feel like a newbie. I still feel like I haven't found anything of significance yet. I still feel like I'm so far behind compared to most other people, even people younger than me. So the thought of somebody asking me gives me a sort of a blind leading the blind kind of thing. Like, what could I possibly say that would be of use? I mean, sort of physician heal thyself kind of thing. I'm wondering what I could accomplish, seeing as how I feel like I've failed for so long with myself. Although on the other hand, I do realize, a lot of the time it's a lot easier to fix other people's problems than your own. I mean, I hear that's what the entire therapy industry revolves around. So to answer the question, I guess I would encourage that person to find their own reasons to believe, or to examine any pre-existing reasons if they have them. A lot of my conflict now comes from not being sure of my own experiences and of my own beliefs and things like that. And I realize that's something I got to work on if I want to figure out more about myself. I'd say that would probably be the same advice I give, even if they were like me and wasn't sure, what were their own experiences and all that. I guess, I guess I would just say in that case, it's the thing, some sort of security in your own beliefs and experiences, or at least, developing that security, because that's how I think I will come to a conclusion one way or another. If I do decide I'm Therian, it'll be because, I've come to some sort of personal conclusion about, what and who I am. And same if I don't, if I conclude I am not. That's where what I said before about, sorting out, what's the doubts talking and what is healthy self-questioning is definitely the trickiest part. But if I were talking to this hypothetical person, I think what I'd be most interested in is their story, because I've always been interested in storytelling, and in the case of taking me other people's journeys to get where they are and what that says about them. So I guess I'd be most interested in why they came to the conclusion that this was a possibility at all for them. What is it about their past experiences that makes them consider this at all? And I guess go from there, I guess comparing it to my own. If they're exactly like me, which seems doubtful, but is always a possibility, then I don't know, maybe we could bounce ideas off of each other, try to figure out where we could go together. That would be kind of interesting, actually. I don't think I've talked to many other foxes even, let alone people who are at my quote-unquote level. So finding folks like me would be an interesting experience. I have struggled with the question of, whether finding the community first has affected my outlook or my judgment on my own possible therianthropy. That's definitely been part of the question of, how seriously should I take, other people's opinions? Even people who have met me and have known me for 20 years, as I said before, at the end of the day, I realize they're still not me, and there's only so far that can go before I have to find my own support and my own identity and things like that. Again, I realize it's not nothing, and that these are folks who have thought seriously about this topic for a long, long time and wouldn't say this kind of thing to me lightly. I guess that's just one more factor to throw it onto all the other factors that I have to consider, and acknowledging that the way I may be a Therian may not be anything like how anybody else is, or that how I think the majority is. That's a lesson I've been learning relatively late in life, just in the more recent past, and it's at the very least loosened up some of my doubts, because now I realize my experience doesn't have to be like anybody else's. But I still think I've got a long way to go there. It just, with something like this, it just feels like there are so many questions upon questions upon questions. I don't have a lot of outlets to talk about this seriously, especially in real life. So every time I do, it seems like, where do I start with this? Am I ever going to find an answer on any sort of level, or at least an answer that doesn't just bring up more questions? And I guess it's not necessarily discouraging, though it has been occasionally, just intimidating. Just because I've been considering this for so long, and I don't feel like I've advanced that far beyond what I started with. It is intimidating. Like I said, I've only recently come to realize how limited, in a sense, my original exposure to therianthropy was. and how they are not necessarily all-encompassing of the quote-unquote Therian experience. So yeah, I mean, seeing the modern community for everything else it might be has definitely been eye-opening for me. Made me realize that, the folks I met in the early days, their experiences aren't rigidly defining. That's absolutely something I've gotten out of the modern internet, the modern community. And I think that's actually a pretty big and good thing. I mean, I think about, the past, Therianthropy through time discussion and all that. And there's, a lot of really deep historical cultural roots to the whole thing. And it can be, a little overwhelming. And maybe I should have realized from that, that it isn't necessarily, what I was first exposed to. But, I mean, for all my doubts, I hope that I stayed in the community, originally way back when then, because, some part of me was, vibing with the experience. Maybe that's my life's purpose here, to figure that out one way or the other.
Now, did we talk enough about Therianthropy as a spectrum?
We hit that topic pretty hard with the disassociative episode last time, and it kind of bled over into this one.
I think it's important to bring it up again here because a stress point in this whole am I not is the very definition of, well, what is am I?
Yeah, good point.
I love that grammar.
In looking at Therianthropy as a spectrum, last time we compared all of our own experiences and we kind of agreed that some Therians have experiences where there's no shifting, not anything like that. And back in the early days of the community, that was not the typical norm. And that's what I found so interesting about listening to all the AHWW stories, is in how the accepted norm and therefore the accepted definitions drift over time. And because of that constant drifting of the commonly accepted norms, it's really important to keep a good firm hold on how things have changed over time. Otherwise, it'll just be a matter of years before nobody knows what anybody's talking about anymore, right?
It's been an interesting phenomenon because, when AHWW was going on, the internet was not as mainstream a thing, and people were probably being drawn together because of their own personal similar experiences. In the beginning, there was a much smaller group within the Therian community sharing their experiences, so it probably did not deviate nearly as much.
Yeah.
The 2000s happened, to 2010s happened, 2020s are happening now, and it's like everybody has access to the internet now, and so many ideas are being exchanged and interchanged that the quote-unquote spectrum that Therianthropy entails is probably getting blurry at this point.
I was going to use the word diluted, but yeah, blurry works.
Because we don't know, we don't really know which.
That's part of why I always bark so loudly about the importance of fundamentals. So long as we can agree on the fundamentals of the Therian identity and experience, then it doesn't matter what fancy words people use. As long as they understand those key fundamentals, it won't really change a thing.
Right. But like in some cases, like if you were to take the fundamentals that were established at AHWW, they might not have actually been all-encompassing for the Therianthropic experience. So it's kind of good that in time that scope has expanded a little bit.
And that evolution definitely does need to happen, and you see evidence of that with the emergence of the alter-human as an umbrella term.
Right.
That, to me, seems like the most recent development on that front. But in coming back to definitions and terms and what Therianthropy actually means, it ultimately comes down to the individual level in determining what they choose to believe or not to believe. And that's precisely what makes Therianthropy such a challenging thing, because there's no rule book, really.
Right. I mean, as I said before, one of the things I've sort of learned about as the community has grown is that, just because I can't directly connect with the experiences other folks have, that alone does not definitively settle the question.
Right.
As I thought it would. At least not as definitively as I thought it once did.
Okay, well, I think I might as well interject my own little experience here that I had, because as I kind of hinted at a little earlier, my experiences of Therian decision Therian indecision is that for me, it wasn't so much about determining what my stereotype was, like you so often see in circles nowadays. And for me, there was nobody to play a balance and check with my ideas. And we've seen that in certain individuals before too. So for me, the whole indecision thing came down to the fact of I had to be my own judge and jury. It came down to whether or not I could accept and trust my own experiences. And for the first, I'd say, 10 or 15 years, I was in a state of continuous warfare with myself. I would have these powerful intuitions and these strong therianthropic experiences, and I would have those moments where there wasn't a shadow of a doubt in my mind of who and what I was. And then the pendulum would swing the other way, and I'd be locked into this human mentality of wanting to analyze and criticize absolutely everything and call down the validity of it all. And back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for years, this went on and on and on. Like, it was really draining. But over time, what eventually happened was I came down to this realization that this is not facts we're dealing with here. It's opinions, it's experiences. And once I started to accept that, it kind of opened the door to not having to definitively say this is or this is not. It just is what it is. And I think I can pin down the real final turning point. This is a good story. I like to share this one. The turning point for me that killed my Therian doubt completely was this quote from Harry Potter. Right at the end of the movie series where he's died and he has that encounter on the other side.
Spoilers.
The quote that really changed it all for me was Dumbledore said to Harry, "Of course it's all happening inside your head, but why does that mean that it's not real?" I was just like, I get it. And ever since that day, I've stopped questioning the validity of my own experiences, and I've stopped having a problem accepting my Therian self because I've let go of that need to control the definition of it. That whole process was a gradual, tumultuous thing that took about 15 years. I guess the long story short, the focus of the ramble, that barking session that I was trying to get at was, regardless of whether we have others around us or not, when it comes to this kind of issue, it always is going to end up coming down to self-confidence, self-perception, believing in yourself, your own experiences, and what you've chosen. One friend said to me once, just do something. Even if it's wrong, just do it. Don't sit there stewing about it. Just do it. If you're wrong, you're wrong. You'll learn something from it. And that's how by the time I reached the Therian community in 2020, I had pretty much on my own pieced together my own understanding of all those fundamental concepts, which I then found echoed in the community, concepts like shifting and what have you not. But it was a slow and often painful process.
BP, do you have any other food for thought for people who may be in similar situations for you? As someone who's experiencing this, do you have any insights for others who may be experiencing this to kind of help them either feel more comfortable with who they are or maybe not have a difficult time with their exploration process?
Well, I guess apart from what Blaze was just talking about, I guess the main thing I would emphasize, I think someone else used this phrase before I use it again, try not to get too stuck trying to put yourself in a box defined by the community around you. Nowadays, I can say that was in the early days, that was 90% of the reason for my doubts and 100% of my angst, because there was nowhere else to define this thing that was completely new to me. So I took what I was first exposed to as all there was.
Mm-hmm.
The definitions. Like I said before, I've come to slowly realize, especially over the last few years, that isn't the case. that there's this wide range of things that are superficially different, but could still possibly at least fall under the same umbrella. I guess I'm still trying to find, that balance I was talking about between healthy skepticism and, begging the question skepticism. But like I said, a lot of that came from that misconception, which I guess came about pretty naturally. Nobody told me that had to be the way it was. It's just circumstances made me think that.
I think it's understandable that first impressions are a very powerful thing, and our first experience with something is going to have a lot to do with our permanent opinions of what that thing is all about. And the longer that opinion remains challenged, the more entrenched it becomes.
Yeah. So I guess to sum up, if one person's experience isn't like, anybody else's around you, it may or may not matter, but it's not an end of the question in of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as I said, was a big reason why I rejected even the possibility way back when. Maybe if somebody else doesn't go through what I went through.
So my final question for you, BP, is: are you a fox?
This is where you say no.
One of us.
It's a running joke, and I'm probably not going to phrase it right, but yeah, in the thread in TG I said, should someone get BlackPaws a t-shirt of a fox wearing a t-shirt that says, "I'm not a fox"? And I think the answer to that is yes. Yes, we need to.
Yes, do it.
So if I answer maybe, is that going to be considered evading the question?
Yes.
Maybe it's a very fox answer, I think.
Well, woohoo.
See, there's excitement there, so he's excited to be a fox.
Well, if nothing else, it would mean that I haven't wasted all my time, but although I suppose even if I weren't, maybe one could argue that it wasn't anyway, but you know what I mean.
Well, thank you for sharing this experience with us. Hopefully it'll help out people who are listening in and are maybe either going through their own questioning processes or seeing other people in the community who are distressing themselves ad nauseum over trying to discover who they are. It's definitely appreciated. If people do have questions for you, do you have a specific way you'd like for them to reach out to you? I caught you off guard with that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question.
I can give them your Discord information, or
I say Discord is probably
okay.
The best. I also have a Telegram thing that I looked at occasionally, but I will have to remind myself, what the relevant information there is as well. So
fair enough. Any other thoughts to wrap up the segment?
Just that I've always found it a little disconcerting, a little nice, but also a little strange that it seems like I've always been surrounded by folks who've been more sure about me than I have.
I kind of thought about that when you were discussing that earlier. I kind of thought about my personal journey with anxiety, and with a lot of things in my life, I need to kind of rely on the people who are outside of me to ground me in the truth of myself.
Sure.
So, I came to the conclusion that I know I am my worst critic, and I'm often wrong about myself. So when I have 30 people who are telling me, "Hey Zeph, this and this and this," I've learned to kind of take it as it is, rather than taking it with that skepticism. But that's my own personal journey. So it's interesting because you're skeptical of those outside also. So it's just kind of interesting.
It is always easier to see the truth of somebody else because you're an outside observer. You don't know everything that's going on inside. The presentation that someone gives to you from the outside, it's easier to filter through and not look at the history. It's more of looking at the individual at the time, and it's just easier.
It also may be one of those cases where the best advice that we give to others is the advice that we should be following ourselves.
That's often the case, in that the things also I've noticed that the things that we are quick to criticize about others are very often the very things that we most need to work on ourselves.
And this explains why Blue Wolf is now a tiger.
Shut your hole.
All right, any other thoughts?
My closing thought would be, again, just ultimately, there's no easy answer. The only real answer is a true answer, and the true answer often takes a lot of time and patience and quite often some blood, sweat, and tears to figure out. So my main advice is to just stay the course, don't give up, and keep an open mind.
I would add on to that, don't stress out so much over it. I know it's easier said than done, but you'll get there. Don't feel like you're a failure at life just because you don't have the answers within a year.
But it's been 25.
It's okay to just bees.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard all this before, and I know it's true, but can't it, come in its own time a little faster?
No. Again, the Wheel of Foxes. Just when you think you found the answer, you're chasing your tail again. The end.
Just be thankful you're not a kid soon. You'd have 9 tails to chase.
Oh boy.
Yeah, no doubt. On to community news. There's a few things that I would like to bring up. First, just a kind of general update with Howls and where we're standing. So the Virginia Howl, I think in the last few episodes I discussed how Virginia Howl, we were trying to have a spring howl and a fall howl. The spring howl is not going to happen. The other host and myself we have too many obligations to make that work out. So someone is currently trying to figure out how to make a howl happen in New Jersey. If you are interested in possibly participating in that, feel free to reach out to me. I will point you in the right directions. The fall Virginia Howl is still going to happen as planned. Right now, tentative dates somewhere between the second week of September and the second week of October, I think, are the date range that we're going for. So we have a Telegram group and a Discord group and all that fun stuff for coordination of that. In previous episodes, we have let Stormy talk about the Colorado Howl. If you want any more information about that, contact him at tstormdancer@gmail.com. And I'm also working with a few people who may have an interest in running a howl in Texas. I have not actually got any authorization from them to point people to where that's being organized, but if you have an interest in that and you may want to help out or you may be interested in attending, let me know and I will nudge you their way and we'll see if we can make something happen. Alrighty then. BlackPaws is gonna okay, yeah, we need to discuss the BlackPaws merchandise that we have on our store now.
Oh boy.
BlackPaws the video game, BlackPaws the lunchbox, BlackPaws the cereal.
Let's just go with a t-shirt.
So one thing I would like to also mention, Cheetah has reached out and mentioned that the serious Therianthropy discussion chats are being held on basically a monthly basis now. Cheetah and I think it's Blood Muffins are trying to host them every few weeks now, so if you're interested, I know there are threads ongoing at the Where list. I'm trying to help out with getting threads on Therian Guide if they're not already out there. So keep an eye out for the serious Therianthropy discussion chats as they go on, and I'll try to help promote those. I want to give a special shout out to Oakleaf for winning an art contest. Woo. Woot woot. This is not affiliated with anything. I'm just doing it kind of because, go Oak. But there was a so on Thorn's Therian Territory server on Discord, there was an art contest and Oakleaf won first place. So I think it would be I just figured it'd be kind of cool to give a shout out here too. Congratulations. I'll try to link the art somehow if there's a way I can do that. Go Oak.
Go Oak.
Does anybody else have anything community-wise?
On a serious note, there's been a fair amount of media attention recently between some new shows and some news-related items, etc. I will say that at least one of them, a recent show, Barax and I watched, it was framing Therianthropy for a group in New York City. I don't really want to give it too much information because it was, frankly, pretty disturbing and upsetting in a lot of ways. It definitely did not portray Therianthropy in a light that I think was appropriate. I think it was much more sensationalized by the individuals who were being interviewed and followed. Therians is what it was called. It's relatively new. If you do choose to find it and watch it, understand that it definitely does not represent anything in our experience. It was very, very unique and pretty special, in my opinion. So I don't know if you want to throw something in there, Bear.
My issue with that program primarily is that it did the same thing that many of the anthropologists who have studied therianthropy have done, and that is it presented therianthropy as almost as a religion, and it isn't.
Yeah.
And what was being described as a Therian experience in there was being presented as the Therian experience and not a Therian experience.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to make. So,
dog bless us, everyone.
Also, they were people that literally had no connection with the rest of the community, as far as I'm aware. I don't know anyone who knows them. I've never heard of any of them. They don't interact in any of the spheres that anyone else that I'm familiar with does. Anyway, it was unusual. Sorry, Blaze, you were about to say.
Sounds like kind of a rogue group more than anything else.
It's an isolated group, I would say, more than rogue. It definitely was different.
There's a pack hierarchy thing going on, and there was discussion about how it's only canines and felines that are part of the Therian community, and it was very, very strange and very, very distorted. It was a view of therianthropy in a parallel universe.
Didn't you say something about them forcing their children to follow it as well?
Yeah. They were indoctrinated into it.
Gosh.
I'm not buying it. You guys are saying that there's some kind of like sensationalized media about therianthropy. Never.
What, cherry pick?
What I did appreciate is that the program itself did not go out of its way to represent Therians as particularly strange.
Yes. I think that the producers did a good job with the material they had.
So
I think they could have found better material.
I think they could have gone out and found alternate sources of material and done a better cross study of it. You know, when you're trying to get viewership, I understand, that doesn't make for good TV, but at the same time, it definitely was different. So it was something I kind of wanted to notice out there, and I know there's been a few other things out there. We're aware of it. We really don't want to give any real oxygen to the fire there. That's why I'm trying not to really provide too much information other to say, other than people who have seen it, we've seen it too. I know my reaction was pretty strong, and I didn't really kind of give any reaction to the group here until someone saw it, and then Bear saw it, and he has less ability to keep his muzzle shut than I do at times. But I certainly echoed many of his comments and feelings associated with it. But I also was trying to say, am I looking at this too harshly? Is this something that I just haven't seen directly, and I'm looking at it more hypercritically than I need to? And
there is a little bit of that tendency, I think, and partly has its roots in the fact simply that we are Therians, and therefore it does matter to us. Whereas a mainstreamer viewing that program would see it as just another piece of entertainment and not really give it 2 seconds thought.
Fair.
Yeah, I have. That is a criticism that I read quite often, where you'll see some piece of media is going to come out that ostensibly deals with Therians, and you'll get a number of people saying, oh, it's going to be terrible, it's going to make the mainstream look at us even worse, etc., and just absolutely nothing happens. Nothing ever happens because of that very reason. Most of the mainstream audience just look at it as another piece of entertainment.
Here now, forgotten in 10 minutes, unfortunately, in some cases. The same phenomenon crashes some very, very well-meaning and genuine attempts to put real information out there, and it just gets taken as some entertainment and written off in 10 minutes, I'm sure.
Yes. And for the record, I am not asking for litter boxes in school.
No, you're right.
That's
no, you're just asking for a woods close to the school.
Yes, well, yes. I mean, obviously, I need a woods. I mean, come on.
To kind of segue a little bit myself, like looking on Twitter and some of the response to some of the definitely not sensationalized, non-representative Therian media that's out there, I think the mainstreamers that do run across it and see it sensationalized to them are like, why does this doesn't apply to me? This doesn't matter to me. What's the point? And I think the disconnect there is that a lot of these things don't really represent why Therianthropy matters to a lot of Therians.
Good point.
It makes it very cringy. It makes it like we're seeking attention and things like that. It's not going behind the scenes and talking about the complications that we either do or don't have in our daily lives. Most of us don't want that spotlight.
And I think a lot of the reason for that is that, plain and simple, like you were saying, we don't want the spotlight because in order to really understand why Therianthropy is a big deal, you got to get nitty gritty, and that doesn't make for good TV.
It's going to require someone to have a genuine interest in it also.
Yeah.
Someone's not going to get that interest out of seeing a cringe comp or something like that. I mean, and maybe they will. I don't know. You know, I want to give a thank you to those of you in the community who are trying to produce positive Therian content. Cheetah Chirps just released another episode. This one's on furries and fursuiters who are also Therians. So I'll give a link to that. Give that some love. Check it out. Does anybody else have anything else going once?
Oh.
Going twice?
Nope.
So
just that it was not my idea to have an entire episode revolving around me, okay? I'm not that egotistical.
Yeah, don't worry, BlackPaws. Like, we know.
Just making sure everybody else knows that.
But if you go to our store and enter in the code BP2022, in the next 2 weeks, you can get a 22% discount off of our BlackPaws merchandise. So,
yeah, pimp the merch.
I just wanted to say that I know I've come across as, very doubtful and perhaps negative about this whole thing. So it occurred to me that some people might be wondering, why I'm still sticking with this to begin with, despite all my doubts. Maybe that's an indication of where I fall on the Therianthropy scale itself. But I think my main reasons are several-fold. One, just plain inertia. I've been around the community for so long, and so far I haven't seen enough of a reason to leave. Second, the faith that my friends then and now have always had in my foxness. As I said before, I know it's something I'm still dealing with, trying to balance out, but it's not exactly something I can ignore. Third, because I know at the core that I don't know for sure that I'm not. So as long as there's the possibility that I am, I feel like I sort of owe it to myself to see that through. And last, just because when I think about being a fox or a werefox or however you want to put it, I think it makes me feel good on some level or in some sense. How and why and whether is part of the process. But yeah, that's why I'm still around, at least until I feel more certain one way or another for sure. So, I mean, I've been at this for a very long time now, so don't be discouraged if you don't figure out the questions yet, because as I've been told many a time, sometimes it might take a lifetime.
Thanks again for BlackPaws for opening up this episode. I know it's been a little bit of vulnerability, but we appreciate you being able to give this kind of your own personal perspective and insights to other community members who may be going through the same thing, especially younger ones who maybe are distressing a little bit too much about things when they shouldn't. If any of you that are listening have any feedback for us, comments on the episode, responses, anything like that, feel free to email us at werearewepodcast@gmail.com. Next episode, we will be doing a little bit more media content, so if you have any suggestions for Therian content or Therian-related media that we can kind of maybe take a quick look at and give a shout-out for, give us an email or reach out to us however you can, and we'll be more than happy to include that. With that said, I think we're all good, so okay, thanks, bye. I did the exit right this time.
That's the exit. Okay, thanks, bye.